When I told my husband we were going on a weekend retreat, he actually smiled. "We could use that," he said while packing a small overnight bag. "Feels like we haven't slowed down in years." I smiled back, but my stomach was tight, because the retreat wasn't what he thought it was, and the real reason I had signed us up wasn't about relaxation. It was about a decision I had already made in my heart. "My name is Linda. I'm 53 years old, and I've been married to my husband, Greg, for 27 years. We met when I was 24 and he was 26. We built everything from scratch: cheap apartments, shared bank accounts, secondhand furniture, long work weeks, and eventually a house filled with children and noise. We did what people are supposed to do. We worked hard, we stayed faithful, we showed up. But somewhere between raising kids and paying bills, we stopped really seeing each other. It wasn't dramatic. There was no betrayal, no screaming fights, just distance. The kind that builds slowly and quietly, like dust on a shelf you forget to wipe. For the last 2 years, I had been wondering something I was too afraid to say out loud. Was this it? Was this what the rest of my life would feel like? Predictable conversations, separate routines, polite affection. Greg was a good man, responsible, steady, but we had become roommates with shared history. The final push came one Tuesday evening when we sat at opposite ends of the couch, both scrolling through our phones in silence. I looked at him and realized we hadn't laughed together in weeks. Not really laughed, not the kind that makes your stomach hurt. That night, I searched for marriage retreats online. What Greg didn't know was that this particular retreat specialized in discernment counseling. It wasn't just about reconnecting. It was for couples on the edge of separation, couples deciding whether to stay married or part ways. I didn't tell him that part. I told him it was about communication and relaxation. He didn't question it. We drove 3 hours north to a quiet lodge tucked into the mountains. The air was crisp, the scenery was beautiful. For a moment, I wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe we just needed time away from routine. But the moment we checked in and I saw the words "Discernment Intensive Weekend" printed on the welcome packet, I felt the weight of what I had done. Greg noticed it too. "What's discernment?" he asked casually. I hesitated. "It just means clarity," I said. That wasn't the full truth. The first session began that evening in a small room with soft lighting and a circle of chairs. There were 6 other couples there. Some sat close together, holding hands. Others sat with noticeable space between them. The counselor introduced the purpose of the retreat clearly. "This weekend is for couples deciding whether to rebuild their marriage or release it." Greg turned his head slowly toward me. "You said this was about reconnecting," he said quietly. "It is," I replied, but my voice felt thin. The counselor asked each couple to share why they were there. When it was our turn, Greg looked at me expectantly. I realized I had brought him into something without giving him the choice to prepare. "I feel disconnected," I said carefully. "I don't know if we're still us." The words sounded harsher in the open air of that room. Greg didn't interrupt, he didn't argue, he just stared at the floor. That silence was heavier than anger. Later that night, back in our small cabin room, he finally spoke. "Were you planning to leave me?" he asked. I didn't answer immediately, and that hesitation said more than any words could. "I didn't know what else to do," I said finally. "I've been unhappy, Greg, not because you're bad, just because we feel empty." He sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm them. "You could have told me." I wanted to say I had tried, that I had hinted, but the truth was I had avoided direct conversations because I was afraid of the answers. The next morning, the retreat separated couples into individual sessions. I sat with a counselor who asked blunt questions. "Are you leaning toward staying married or leaving?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm tired of feeling invisible." She asked if I had communicated that clearly to Greg. I realized I hadn't. I had assumed he should sense it. I had expected him to notice what I wasn't brave enough to articulate. Meanwhile, Greg had his own session. Later, he told me the counselor asked him if he felt blindsided. He said yes. That word stung. Blindsided. I hadn't meant to ambush him, but I had. The second group session was raw. One couple admitted to an affair. Another confessed they had been living in separate bedrooms for a year. Listening to them made our problems feel both smaller and more fragile at the same time. When it was our turn again, Greg spoke first. "I didn't know she was this unhappy," he said. "I thought we were just busy. I thought routine meant stable." I looked at him and saw genuine confusion. Not neglect, not indifference, confusion. The counselor asked him if he wanted to work on the marriage. "Yes," he said without hesitation, "but I can't fix what I don't know is broken." That sentence hit me hard. Because I had been quietly keeping score, counting moments he didn't initiate affection, noticing when conversations felt short, but I had never clearly told him how deeply I was struggling. That evening, we went for a walk outside the lodge. The mountains were quiet, the air felt thinner up there. "Why didn't you tell me you were thinking about leaving?" he asked softly. "Because I wasn't sure," I admitted. "I didn't want to say something I couldn't take back." He nodded slowly, "And instead you brought me here." It sounded almost ironic. The final day of the retreat required each couple to declare their next step: rebuild intentionally, separate temporarily, or move toward divorce. My heart pounded as we sat there. Greg looked at me and said, "I choose to rebuild, if you'll let me." I had expected defensiveness, maybe pride, but not humility. In that moment, I realized something uncomfortable. I hadn't wanted a divorce as much as I wanted proof that he would fight for us, and that wasn't fair. The real purpose of the retreat wasn't to end our marriage, it was to force honesty. I had been too afraid to demand change directly, so I engineered a dramatic setting to make it happen. "I choose to try," I said quietly. We didn't leave the retreat magically fixed. We left aware that comfort can quietly turn into distance, aware that silence is more dangerous than conflict. On the drive home, the car felt different than the drive up, lighter but fragile. "I wish you had trusted me enough to talk," Greg said. "I know," I replied. I took my husband to a marriage retreat without telling him the real purpose. I thought I was protecting myself from a painful conversation. Instead, I nearly created a bigger wound. Sometimes we don't need dramatic gestures to save a marriage. We need uncomfortable honesty. We need to say, "I feel lonely," before that loneliness turns into resentment. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I do know this: marriages don't end in one moment. They fade in silence. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't planning an exit. It's finally speaking the truth before it's too late.